Yeah, children, now the program can start. All the best.
Good morning and namaste. Today's esteemed guest, Janardhan Sir, founder chairperson of Puberty School and College, Prabhu Sir, co-founder and CEO, Sucharita Ma'am, Principal Rekha Ma'am, curriculum director, Sujata Ma'am, student observer, Avikshit, beloved teachers, invitees, friends, and delegates. It gives me great pleasure to extend to you all very warm greetings on behalf of Puberty family. It is also my pleasure to welcome you all. Puberty MUN started its journey in 2019, today being our third MUN session. This year's agenda being the role of UNO in the present Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the opinion of member nations towards the cause. I now request Sangama to introduce today's guest with a happy virtual welcome.
Good morning. Dr. N. Janardhan is a Senior Research Fellow, Gulf Asia Program at the Anwar Garvish Diplomatic Academy in Abu Dhabi. With nearly 25 years of regional expertise, he analyzes and unravels the evolving multidimensional partnerships between the countries of the Gulf and Asia. In addition, he offers diplomats PGD and MA courses on Gulf and Asian foreign policies. He is the author of about 500 articles and 4 books. His last academic book was Arab Gulf's Pivot to Asia, From Transactional to Strategic Partnerships, published by Gerlach in Germany in 2020. Dr. Janardhan is also Managing Assistant Editor of the Journal of Arabian Studies, Routledge. In his previous stints, he has served as a political analyst in the government and private institutions in the United Arab Emirates and India. With a PhD from Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi, where Prabhu Raj Jagirdar sir and Sucharita Sriram ma'am also studied, Dr. Janardhan is a frequent speaker at conferences and contributes regularly to various think tanks and media outlets in Asia, Europe, and the United States. He is an avid sports person. He plays tennis and has competed a marathon and a triathlon and skydiving too. For the record, he belongs to an age when MUN was not an activity in school, but Dr. Janardhan is a keen student of the UN system and a supporter of reforming the United Nations. Avikshit Janardhan finished his class 12 this summer by receiving an international bachelorette diploma from Al-Batin Academy in Abu Dhabi. In 2 weeks, he'll be joining the University of Manchester at Amherst in the United States to study and obtain a bachelor's degree in sports management. As a part of his efforts to balance academic and extracurricular activities, Avikshit pursued and acquired a great deal of MUN experience. Over 7 years, he participated in about a dozen conferences, both as a delegate and the chair. He's also an avid reader of fictional novels, enjoys playing and watching basketball, sings and plays the keyboard, and loves socializing with family and friends in his free time. On a lighter note, he fantasizes being able to possess Tony Stark and Iron Man's extraordinary qualities: genius, billionaire, playboy, and philanthropist. Thank you.
Students of grade 8, 9, and 10 who participate in the MUN session involve themselves in in-depth research work related to the given topic and debate over the designated agenda. Participation in MUN gives students a chance to realize the importance of international relations, security, and world peace. I sincerely hope this event will help you take action as global citizens, leading a fair and just society for the future of humanity. Again, welcome everyone. Thank you. I now request Moksha to continue.
Morning everyone, I'm Moksha.
And I'm Ahi.
Here to brief you about Model United Nations MUN. The participants of MUN include the students of grade 10 IC and 9 IC. Importance of MUN in schools. Model United Nations, also known as Model UN or MUN, is an extracurricular activity in which students typically role-play the delegates to United Nations and stimulate UN committees. This activity takes place at MUN conference, which is usually organized by a high school or a college. Importance. Preparing and participating in MUN helps students develop leadership skill, research writing, and public speaking. Moreover, coming up with solutions acceptable to the majorities of the representatives also integrates skills to negotiation, conflict resolution, and cooperation.
Advantages. Worldly knowledge. Keeping up with the world affairs may get dull at times by reading news articles or watching news programs. By participating in MUN, your knowledge of the world will increase tremendously as you represent a country at a global level. and interact with other delegates representing other countries. As a delegate, you will be required to research about your allotted countries in depth, analysis and understand their foreign policies, and considering which factors would influence the behavior of the country at an international level. As you study the intricacies of the issues, the background, history, treatment in the UN, and previous resolutions passed on it, you will get practical and thorough knowledge of the world affairs.
Confidence building. MUN involves working in teams to develop resolutions, to assign tasks, and to express views in a self-assured manner. From preparing for the Model United Nations discussions, debates, and resolutions made during the MUN, the entire experience will serve to boost your confidence. Participating in MUN will build confidence, which will help you in future interactions where you would need to express yourselves in high-pressure situations. Other advantages include analytical and problem-solving skills, diplomacy, public speaking, networking, writing skills, and leadership skills. Model United Nations is built on open minds and fresh ideas. Many of you have been asked to represent national agendas or stands that you may personally disagree with. You will do so fairly and forcefully. This open-mindedness is the essence of successful diplomacy, the ability to understand and analyze all positions, including those that you oppose. Your acceptance of differing viewpoints clearly distinguishes your confidence. I believe it will prove crucial as you assume leadership roles in the 21st century. Dear young leaders, I thank you all for your commitment and wish you all a most stimulating conference.
Good morning, distinguished guests, delegates, faculty advisors, and my dear friends. It is my distinct pleasure to invite you all to the Preparatory School's Model United Nations 2021. My name is Ritika, and I'm honored to serve as the co-chairperson for today's session with the support of Ms. Anushka, the chair. Today, we have gathered here to discuss about the role of UNO in the present Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the opinion of member nations towards the cause. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is older than the United Nations itself. It has a long controversial history. MUN is such an enriching experience. It helps us take the first step towards the change by making us conscious of what is happening in the world surrounding us. It makes us reflect about how we live. It also develops countless skills like public speaking, teamwork, and problem solving. I hope we all learn from this experience.
Dear delegates, each of the countries have chosen you to represent their views on the subject. During the course of this discussion, each one of you will be given an opportunity to put forward your nation's opinion in the matter. I encourage you all to take the debate with appropriate seriousness. Remember that your work and commission is beneficial to you as an individual and also to the world as a whole. I would like to remind the respected delegates that the path that we have chosen to pursue has to be the one that meets the objective. Despite us all representing different countries, today we are all one team collaborating to resolve a common issue. Hence, I request all to respect the thoughts and views of each other. We are leaders of the future. We can change this world. Let's make it count.
When I look at the scenario, I'm brimming with excitement. This scene before me is quite honestly humbling. I can feel the hunger for knowledge in the room. Let us all make the most of this conference. I wish you all the best for this conference. Thank you.
Delegates, faculty advisors, and distinguished guests. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is older than the United Nations itself. It has a long controversial history which is too broad in scope. The intense conflict and various internal pressures of both sides means that the peace process requires help from the international community in order to move forward. The Israel-Palestinian conflict is intense, controversial, complex, and violent. Although different plans have been tried and failed, negotiations are restarting on both sides. Now is an important time for the international community to act and help both sides come to an agreement that will lead to peace. I hereby declare Preparatory International School Model United Nations 2021 open. The next piece of information is for the audience. We have completed the committee session and we have moved into a Model United Nations. What I am going to do next is ask them to open committee and move to a given point where I feel necessary. I will explain informally to the audience what is happening here for the purpose of the committee. Thank you all for being present here. Let us begin the session. Good morning, delegates. Welcome to the Pupilatory MUN Session 2021. The topic on this year's agenda is the situation in Israel and Palestine. Entrusted with the maintenance of international peace and security, empowered with unique authority and backed by formidable enforcement powers, the UNO is perhaps the most important forum to seek peaceful solution. We hope that fellow delegates will engage in relevant debates in order to make this conference productive. Let us all make wise decisions after considering every resolution. Bear in mind that the UN was created to make a better world and not to satisfy an individual will. We commence today's session with roll call. When your country is called, please respond present by raising your hand.
Delegates of Israel, delegates of Palestine, delegates of Jordan, delegates of Saudi Arabia, delegates of USA, delegates of Russia, delegates of India. Thank you, delegates.
Delegates, are there any points of motions on the floor?
You have been recognized. To what point do you rise?
Motion to set the agenda, ma'am.
Granted, delegate. So what agenda would you like to set?
To discuss about the role of UNO in the present Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the opinion of member nations towards the cause and support by member nations.
Are there any objections to the motion? Seeing none, the motion is now in order. Thank you, delegate. The motion has been proposed, and we will now be adopting the topic, Role of UNO in the present Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the opinion of member nations towards the cause and support by member nations. Delegates, we will now be moving into the speakers list. All delegates who would like to include their country's name in the speakers list, please raise your hands now.
Delegate of Israel, you have been recognized. Delegate of Palestine, you have been recognized. Delegate of Saudi Arabia, you have been recognized. Delegate of USA, you have been recognized. Delegate of India, you have been recognized. Delegate of Jordan, you have been recognized. Delegate of Russia, you have been recognized.
Delegate of Israel, you have 7 minutes to express your views on the topic.
Fellow delegates, respected chair and esteemed president, the delegates of Israel are pleased to put forth their views regarding today's agenda.
Good morning. With the prior permission of the chair and the delegates of the House, I'm Sangama, the delegate of Israel. The unresolved violence between Israel and Palestine is because of their past, which haunts and traces back to 3,000-year-old grievances. The civil wars in the Roman Empire compelled many Jews to migrate for safety and livelihood to different parts of the world. Persecution of Jews is undeniably a heart-wrenching phase of the Jewish history. The worst subjugated time for the Jews was the World War II, where Hitler confiscated everything from the Jews and sent them to concentration camps, where the Jews were butchered, gassed, and exterminated. Millions of them were liquidated just because they were Jews. However, in 1881, Jews went back to Israel, and in the year 1948, Jerusalem was made the capital. A series of conflicts started with the Arab-Israeli War of 1948 broke out when the 5 Arab nations assailed nascent Israel, followed by the Six-Day War. Israel offered to return the captured territories of the Sinai Peninsula and the Golan Heights to Egypt and Syria, respectively, but received 3 famous no's from the Arab League's Khartoum's conference, which encompassed no peace with Israel, no recognition, and no negotiation with Israel. Israel has been treated very abysmally and is still being treated so. The Oslo Accords of 1993 and 1995 were a piece of agreements which were meant to resolve the decades-old conflict. If we take down our weapons, there'll be no Israel. If Hamas take down theirs, there'll be peace. Thank you. The next delegate will continue about the Oslo Accords.
With the prior permission of the chair and the delegates of the House, I'm Sunaini, the delegate of Israel. During an address, Abu Mazen announced that as long as Israel extricates Palestine prisoners, they would no longer be bound to the Oslo Accords. But the Oslo Accords does not approve any restrictions on settlements and it has made Israel responsible for security, and with such responsibility, we have the rights to hold prisoners. In 2008, Palestine rejected our unprecedented offer, which exhibits that Palestine is not interested in peace. Followed by violent acts, a new radical curriculum was rolled out in 2014, which was full of jihad and was confirmed by Europe's Foreign Affairs Chief, Federica Mogherini. 30 years from now, 1.3 million Palestinian children are going to be the next generation of terrorists because of what they pursue on daily basis of human brutality from school. In addition to it, on February 8, 2016, Hassan Alam, the Mufti of Gaza, spoke about killing Jews on air. Moving on, Israel did a major concession act, uprooting 1,000 Israelis from Gaza because we wanted peace. But all this for an organization having a charter which explicitly denies the right of Israel to exist in any border. Is it really this issue? This is not at all a matter of settlements. It's seen profoundly. In the recent conflict, Israel tried to de-escalate the situation. The court proceedings were postponed. The traditional parade, which we had over a century in Jerusalem, was rerouted. Thirdly, Jewish people were restricted to enter Temple Mount on certain days, and they didn't. But as it was a pure provocation of a jihadi terror organization, Hamas, the situation scintillated. Firing of 2,900 plus rockets from Gaza, in which 25% of rockets ended up killing innocent Palestinians, shows that motive is just to maltreat Israelis. Peace will come, but when the Arabs will love their children more than they hate us. Thank you. Here is the next delegate to clarify some facts.
Good morning. With the prior permission of the chair and the delegates of the House, I am Anurag, the delegate of Israel representing Gilad Edan. The world claims that the loss is disproportionate, ignoring the fact that millions of Israelis are spending days in bomb shelters and are leading divergent lives, the main reason of minor Syrian casualties. Though there are few deaths that relentlessly targeting Israel's finances by making Israel squander money on interceptors, consuming 3% of GDP. Fatality in Gaza is due to the usage of citizens as human shields. IDF warns people before an attack by roof knocking and is the only army in the world which makes phone calls before an incursion. Quote, Hamas militants would block the exits to places residents were asked to evacuate. Gaza medical aid workers stated this on September 19, 2014. Sami Abu openly backed this up. On 6 August 2014, IDF was shot from Wafa Hospital, a hospital. All the videos were uploaded by Israel's official channel, but still the world oppresses and opposes these facts. The construction of underground terror tunnels, which snake beyond civilian areas with the deliberative goal of increasing Syrian casualties, as retaliation is the only way to dismantle Hamas capabilities. And it comes under the fact that this is agreeable under international law. Israel is accused of ethnic cleansing and establishing a regime of apartheid, turning a blind eye to the fact that Arab citizens of Israel have been voted to every Knesset, currently holding 17 seats. Moving on, Algeria had 140,000 Jews. Egypt used to have 75,000 Jews. Iraq had over 130,000 Jews. Where are they? They fled as refugees after suffering persecutions and deadly pogroms like the Farood of Baghdad in 1941, which is continuing till now. A Palestinian youngster killed a young mother called Afna in 2016. People are butchered on their dining tables. Two among many incidents. In what way is it fair to term the protection of Jews as apartheid when backward classes in the world are having special privileges? Where is the real apartheid? It took the General Assembly a few months to convene a discussion on COVID-19, a lethal virus which took millions of lives around the world. But when it comes to the matter of holding a debate, especially to pressurize Israel with the bias criteria and give a terrorist organization a free pass, the UN was able to convene after a span of 11 days. The UN has to take swift and brisk steps to curb the war without further ado and make sure it doesn't single out Israel again. The preconception and detrimental attitude is evidenced by Palestine's own kidnapping of Palestinian students for rejecting the anti-Semitic policies they are forced. Mohsen Hassan Youssef, son of co-founder of Hamas, admitted the involvement of Hamas in this kidnapping. For one last time I ask, where is the real apartheid? Thank you.
Honorable President, fellow delegates, thank you very much for your valuable time.
Thank you, Delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any and all.
Thank you, Delegate. This delegate is open to any and all points of information. Are there any points of information to this delegate?
The Delegate of Palestine would like to pose a question.
Delegate of Palestine, you have been recognized.
Madam President, Ehud Olmert, the ex-Prime Minister of Israel, said in the Woodrow Wilson Center that few senior Israeli officers approached US Attorney Connie Rice and Palestinian President Abu Mazen asking them not to cherish the 2008 peace plan because if they do so, it would have led to the killing of Ehud Olmert by extreme Israelis who had earlier killed Yitzhak Rabin for signing the Oslo Accords. Abu Mazen even told that since Olmert's political scenario worsened, they could not meet to negotiate, and if the negotiations had lasted 4 more months, a viable solution could have been found. Don't you think it is cowardice to blame Hamas and Abu Mazen for each and every failed peace initiative when there are major errors from your side as well?
Madam President, those who wish to blame Israel for the lack of continuity in these comprehensive peace agreements will surely emphasize on this single statement. The statement rose after an interview by an Australian journalist. But I would like to clear the fact that even Abu Mazen, at the initial stage, he had dodged off the initial peace process, saying that he wanted to consult some peace process. Yes, there were errors from our side, but the majority are from Hamas. They declined 4 peace processes. This is actually the truth, which is not at all emphasized by the media. Thank you, Madam President.
Madam President, Delegate of Palestine would like to pose a question.
Delegate of Palestine, you have been recognized.
Israel spoke about Hamas using residential areas as base for missile launches. But how would you justify the statement given by ex-Israeli soldier in an interview with IDF deliberately uses Palestinian homes as bases to carry out their military missions?
Madam President, the ex-soldier doesn't stand for the entire decisions and the spectrum of Israel. Yes, Israel bombs residential areas, but only after making sure that there are no civilians and nothing, even animals are not harmed. This is every single precaution is taken. And I would like to clear the fact that Hamas uses civilian homes as storage units for the explosives. The explosives and the underground terror tunnels acts as a detonator, which starts a chain reaction, which leads to a lot of casualties. This is the reason of high percentage of fatality in Gaza.
Madam President, Delegate of Saudi Arabia would like to ask a question.
Delegate of Saudi Arabia, you have been recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. Israel has stated that it takes all precautions to make sure that there are no casualties and doesn't target civilians. So how could you justify the bombardment of Al-Jala by the IDF?
Madam President, Obama's former spokesperson, Tommy Waiter, he tweeted officially that he spoke with the people inside the building who were working in Al-Jala. And all of them agreed that Hamas were actually there. And even AP's former spokesperson, Matthew Friedman, reported that AP staff, along with the Al-Jala staff, saw the Hamas with their own eyes entering and even blamed them and even threatened them to make sure that they do not open their mouth, as there were pictures of rocket launchers with them. Thank you, Madam President.
Delegate of Palestine, you have 7 minutes to express your views on the topic.
Honorable Chair and esteemed delegates, the delegates of Palestine are delighted to be part of the 3rd annual MUN Conference. Madam Chair, now I heed to my fellow delegates.
Good morning, everyone. With the prior permission of the Chair and the delegates of the House, I, Lakshmi VN, the Delegate of Palestine. The ongoing Israel-Palestinian issue has shaken up the world, and we must all be aware that this issue is not something that started just yesterday. It's something that has been going on for decades. It started with the Balfour Declaration of 1917, which stated the establishment of a Jewish homeland in Palestine. With prior to this declaration, several Jews immigrated to Palestine. By 1936, there were nearly 400,000 immigrants. The Palestinian partition plan divided Palestine into an independent Arab and Jewish state, according to which Arabs received 47% and Jews received 53%. The first Intifada marked the birth of Hamas. It was the very child of Israeli occupation and harassment. In September 1993, the Oslo Accords were signed between American President Bill Clinton, Israeli PM Yitzhak Rabin, and PLO leader Yasser Arafat. Israelis opposed dealing with the PLO, a group it considered a terrorist organization. They feared losing the land which they considered biblically theirs. Among Palestinians, supporters of Arafat's Fatah movement accepted Oslo as an unfortunate but necessary compromise. The Second Intifada bared its fangs more viciously than the first. Not only did thousands die, thousands more were left disabled for life, some mentally, others physically. I've heard people say Palestinians are nothing but terrorists. They have no mercy, they're criminals. They say Palestinian blood is cheap, not worthy of reputation. But let me remind you that these cheap terrorists you're referring to are the results of your own doings. We, the Palestinians, don't even have the liberty of living peacefully in our own homeland. The trauma suffered, the scars borne, the lives lost by the Palestinians is far worse than anything the Israelis had to face. At least you can defend yourself. We have been stripped off from that right too. A friendly reminder, seeing the horrors of war on social media and having bombs thrown into your neighborhood are two very different things. Thank you. Now my fellow delegate will continue.
With the prior permission of the chair and the delegates of the House, I am Gurudhan, the delegate of Palestine. The Al-Aqsa Mosque is the third holiest site in Islam. It is located in the old city of Jerusalem on top of Temple Mount. I would like to throw a light upon what happened on May 10th. When Palestinians were offering their last prayer of Ramadan at Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Israeli police showed up without any notice and started pushing the Palestinians out of the place, doing which they fired rubber-coated metal bullets, stun grenades, and tear gas, killing 4 and injuring 300 Palestinians. The Palestinians threw stones at the Israeli police to protect themselves. It was not the first time that Israeli police stormed the mosque, but second since May 10th. Israel during the ambush had held few of our citizens captive, because of which the Hamas issued an ultimatum asking Israeli forces to withdraw and release the captives, failing which Israel would have to face consequences. Since Israel did not pay heed to ultimatum, 7 rockets were launched in retaliation of the same day. Coming out from May 10th, I'll not talk about Israel's one of the biggest human rights violations, detentions. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians have been unlawfully incarcerated by Israeli forces since 1967. Hundreds have been placed in detention without any charge. And a thing to highlight is that young children have also been detained for engaging in non-violent activism. Many Palestinian detainees said that they have faced physical and psychological torture. And now my fellow delegate will continue.
Good afternoon to one and all present here. With the prior permission of the chair and the delegates of the House, I am Shreyas, the delegate of Palestine. We appreciate the support by United Nations and its agencies for helping the citizens in Gaza live a better life. We hope that the organization will be successful in providing a viable and long-lasting solution to this prolonged conflict. Nonetheless, the people of Palestine have been facing the issue of land loss and eviction since the 19th century. The eviction of our citizens from our own land is very disappointing and depressing. According to the UN partition plan, we were to get 43% of the land which was under Mandate Palestine. Despite us being the majority, we were given considerably less land. The war which broke out against Israel immediately after the UN partition plan ended up costing us our land. We not only lost our land after the 1948 war, but were also on the verge of losing our identity. The Israeli government has been committing atrocities against the Palestinians since the illegal occupation of West Bank and the control over Gaza in 1967. The citizens of Palestine are being treated as slaves, not even as settlers, in a place where they have been living even before the idea of a Jewish state was born. Let it be known to this council that we will not be silenced with Israel committing crimes against the Palestinians, and there is nothing more despicable than to use our own sufferings and martyrdom to try to justify the torture, the brutalization, the demolition of homes that Israel daily commits against the Palestinians. Thank you.
Good afternoon to one and all present here. With the prior permission from the chair and the delegates of the House, I am Rohan, the delegate of Palestine. We are looking forward for the support of UN countries beyond the borders for solution to this international issue, and we hope that a viable solution will be found soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any and all.
Thank you, Delegate. This delegate is open to any and all points of information. Are there any points of information to this delegate?
Madam President, Delegate of Israel would like to pose a question.
Delegate of Israel, you have been recognized.
Thank you. Palestine Authority is enriching terrorism. Streets are regularly being named after terrorists. For example, a street was named after the Dalal al-Mughrabi, who was responsible for bus hijacking, which killed 35 Israelis. Palestine is rationalizing the idea of violence with the name of self-defense due to the absence of military and oppression, which is caused by the forced involvement of youth for destroying Israel. How would you justify the act of naming streets after terrorists and periodical claims of so-called peace by Abu Mazen?
Madam President, I would like to tell that the names of the street are not solely given by the Palestinian Authority, but by the respective municipalities. Yes, a street was named after Dalal Mughrabi, but we cannot ignore the fact that Menachem Begin, the ex-Prime Minister of Israel, has streets, museums, and public places named after him, even though he is infamous for the Deir Yassin massacre and even other massacres which killed a lot of Palestinians. Most of these public places are also named or funded by the government itself. So I hope I have clarified the queries.
Thank you.
Madam President, the Delegate of Israel would like to ask a question.
Delegate of Israel, you have been recognized.
Palestine claims that Israel attacks innocent civilians and that civilians are our main target. If they would have informed the civilians, not informed the civilians, how do you think that Gazans exactly filmed the bombings and destruction of buildings? How would you justify this act of Palestine, which is misleading international community by violence and naming them as summer camps, where they are using children for the propaganda, and have an entire dedicated curriculum where they are taught to hate Jews, where women are harassed on religious basis and paid to slave system only for killing civilians, which isn't self-defense at all.
Madam President, I would like to tell that even the United Nations bears witness to the casualties and oppression faced by the Palestinians. And since the recent revision of the Hamas Charter, the organization is trying to improve the infrastructure and protect the infrastructure from Israeli missiles. I hope I have answered your question.
Delegate of Jordan, you have 5 minutes to express your views on the topic.
With prior permission of the Chair and the delegates of the House, I, Shravya, the Delegate of Jordan, here to begin today's session. Honorable Chair, esteemed delegates, the Delegate of Jordan is delighted to be part of the 3rd Annual Pupil MUN Conference. The United Nations is an intergovernmental organization aiming to maintain international peace and security. The UN was established after World War II with the aim of preventing future wars, succeeding the ineffective League of Nations. Thank you. Now, my fellow delegate.
With the prior permission of the Chair and the delegates of the House, I, Alok, the Delegate of Jordan, here to put my opinion on Israel-Palestine conflict. Jordan annexed the West Bank on 24 April 1950 after the 1949 armistice agreements. In 1951, King Abdullah I was assassinated by a Palestinian from the Husseini clan. After annexation, all Palestinians in the West Bank became Jordanian citizens. Both the West and the East Bank had roughly equal populations. Palestinians in the West Bank did not face any discrimination and were given the same equal rights as the Jordanians of the East Bank. After the Six-Day War, Jordan lost control of the West Bank to Israel. About 3 lakh Palestinians fled to Jordan. In 1970, a conflict broke out between the Jordanian armed forces led by King Hussein and the Palestine Liberation Organization led by Yasser Arafat. The Oslo Accord enabled the Jordanian delegation to openly negotiate with the Israeli delegation, and on October 26, 1994, the Israeli-Jordanian Peace Treaty was signed. The Israeli-Jordanian Peace Treaty created some divisions between Jordan and the Palestine Authority over the issue of the Islamic holy places in East Jerusalem. Thank you. Here is my fellow delegate to continue.
With the prior permission of the chair and the delegates of the House, I, Anis, the delegate of Jordan, would like to speak about foreign relations with Jordan. Jordan has close relations with the United States and the United Kingdom. These relations were damaged when Jordan proclaimed its neutrality during the Gulf War and maintained relations with Iraq. In public, Jordan continued to call for the lifting of UN sanctions against Iraq. Jordan signed a non-aggression pact with Israel in Washington, D.C. on July 25, 1994. Jordan and Israel signed a historic peace treaty on October 26, 1994, witnessed by President Clinton, accompanied by Secretary of State Baron Christopher. The US has participated with Jordan and Israel in trilateral development discussions during which key issues have been water sharing, security and trade, finance, and banking issues. Jordan also participates in the multilateral war talks, and recently Jordan has signed a free trade agreement with the United States. Jordan is an active member of the UN and other agencies. Jordan is a member of the World Bank, Arab League, etc. Israel captured Jerusalem in 1967, which is located at the West Bank of Jordan. Since 1967, Pakistan has been demanding its vacation at the international level. Jordan, together with Pakistan, is playing an effective role in the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Thank you. Now my partner delegate will continue.
With the prior permission of the chair and the delegates of the House, I panel the delegate of Jordan here to put my opinion on the conflict. Israel-Jordan relations are diplomatic, economic, and cultural. The two countries share a land border that connects the West Bank with Jordan. The relationship between the two countries is regulated by the Israel-Jordan Peace Treaty signed in 1994. Relations between the countries get strained from time to time, usually over tensions at the Al-Aqsa Mosque. In 2010, when the government of Jordan sought permission from the international governments to produce nuclear fuel for use in Jordanian power plants, Israel objected. Promoting peace between the Israel and the Palestinian Authority is a major priority for Jordan. It supports US efforts to mediate a final settlement, which it believes should be based on the 2002 Arab Peace Initiative proposed by Saudi Arabia. In March 2021, Jordan delayed approval of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's flight over the country on the way to the United Arab Emirates. Israel accused Jordan of this doing deliberately as a response to a dispute over Israeli entry permits for Jordanian crown for a trip to the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Jordanian Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi accused Israel of breaching terms agreed to the trip to the Alaska and accused Netanyahu of toying with the region and its people, tried to live in peace for the sake of electoral and populist concerns, and destroying the trust which is the basis for ending the conflict. In April 2021, Jordan condemned Israel for raiding the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem and silencing the minaret's loudspeaker. Thank you.
With prior permission of the chair and the delegates of House, I, Diplomat, the delegate of Jordan. Again, let us be clear, in a city that is home to the three monotheistic religions, all sides must uphold and fully respect the status quo of holy sites. Freedom of worship and peaceful freedom of assembly must be guaranteed. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any and all.
Thank you, Delegate. This delegate is open to any and all points of information. Are there any points of information to this delegate? Delegate of Saudi Arabia, you have 5 minutes to express your views on the topic.
Honorable Chair, fellow delegates, and distinguished guests, the delegates of Saudi Arabia are delighted to be the part of 3rd Annual Pupil-to-MUN Conference.
With the prior permission of the chair and the delegates of the House, I, Janvi, delegate of Saudi Arabia, here to put forward my views on the conflict. In November 1947, the United Nations voted the partition, the British Mandate of Palestine, into a Jewish state and an Arab state. Political tension, military conflicts, and dispute between Arab countries and Israel escalated during 20th century, mostly fading out in the early 21st century. The roots of the Arab-Israeli conflict have been attributed to the support by Arab League member countries of Palestinians, a fellow League member, and the simultaneous rise of Zionism and Arab nationalism towards the end of the 19th century, though the two national movements had not clashed until the 1920s. Clashes broke out immediately between Jewish and Arab in Palestine. As British troops prepared to withdraw the Palestine, conflict continued to escalate with both Jewish and Arab forces committing violences. Saudi Arabia is one of the largest providers of aid to the Palestinian people since 2002. Thank you. Now here's my fellow delegate to continue.
With the prior permission of the chair and the delegates of the House, myself, Sanjana, delegate of Saudi Arabia, to speak on the Israel-Palestine conflict. Jerusalem, being a holy site for more than one religion, has been a site of regional conflict for more than the past 50 years. In many instances, the fundamental rights of the Palestinians have been violated, and civilians have suffered much death and damage due to violence by political forces. Saudi Arabia recognizes Palestine as an independent state on the basis of pre-1964 borders, with East Jerusalem as its capital. It condemns Israeli oppression on the Palestinian people regarding access to East Jerusalem and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Increasing restrictions and Israeli influence regarding access to Old Jerusalem and the mosque have been a cause of great resentment to the Palestinian people and has also led to riots. Jerusalem is desired as a capital by both Israel and Palestine. Saudi Arabia believes both sides have equal rights on the Holy Land of Jerusalem. Hence, a two-state solution with equal powers to both sides will be most appropriate. Saudi Arabia has supported Palestine by contributing financially to the Palestinian National Authority and by supporting Palestinian refugees. Saudi Arabia has insisted on holding peace discussions and seeking global help to resolve the conflict without hindrance to innocents, merely for reason. Now here is my fellow delegate to continue.
With the prior permission of the chair and the other delegates of the House, I, Karthik, delegate of Saudi Arabia, here to put forward my opinion on the conflict. The Israel-Palestinian conflict goes to the heart of the Charter of the UN and its fundamental principles. Based on the painful experience of the two world wars, that the conflict be solved without recourse to violence, and the dignity and worth of human person be respected, and that the acquisition and annexation of territories of another state by force is inadmissible. We appreciate the support by United Nations and its agencies for helping the Palestinian citizens in Gaza to live a better life. We hope that the organization will be successful in providing a viable and lasting solution to this prolonged conflict. Over the near century that has passed since the Israeli-Palestinian conflict began, the international community and the United Nations have been unable to put an end to this conflict and realize a just and lasting peace. Dear delegates, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, the situation is not moving in the direction of sustainable peace. As we witnessed over the last few months, security incidents and provocations continue to dangerously escalate the already precarious situation in Gaza, in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and at times inside Israel. We deeply condemn Israel's flagrant violation of Palestinian rights, calling the world to act urgently to put an end to the military operations. Our country called for a revival of peace talks which were aimed at securing a two-state solution. We also condemn the violation of sanctity of Islam's holy sites and forcible evictions of Palestinians from their home in East Jerusalem. The Palestinian course is our first course and will remain on top until Palestine achieve all their legitimate rights, including the establishment of an independent state with Eastern Jerusalem as its capital. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Myself, Rishan, delegate of Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is looking forward for the support of United Nations countries beyond the borders for solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any and all.
Thank you, Delegate. This delegate is open to any and all points of information. Are there any points of information to this delegate?
Madam President?
I, Sujana, the delegate of USA, would like to pose a question.
Delegate of USA, you have been recognized.
Thank you for the recognition, Chair. Saudi Arabia is considered to be the most vocal critic of Israel at the United Nations sessions. Can you please justify your act of criticizing Israel for defending itself in the brutal war begun by the Hamas?
Madam President, I would like to answer that Hamas is a resistance movement against the illegal occupation of Israeli forces. And coming to the defense of Israeli forces, Hamas asked Israel to step back from the occupied West Bank, which Israel has not done till date and is also being condemned by the international community as well.
Madam President, the delegate of Israel would like to pose a question.
Delegate of Israel, you have been recognized.
The delegate mentioned that Saudi wants a peaceful solution, then why isn't it increasing funds for the for the welfare of the people? Because there are many starving to death, whereas Hamas are spending millions for terror tunnels and is improving day by day.
Madam President, I would like to answer that Saudi Arabia has been very precise about the fundings and remains as one of the top donators to Palestine. We are increasing the funds for the welfare of the people, as well as the salaries for the employees of Palestinian Authority. Coming to the question that Hamas are improvising day by day, even Israel is improvising day by day in terms of weaponry and rocketry. So it's obvious that Hamas will improvise themselves in order to protect the people and the homeland.
Delegate of USA, you have 5 minutes to express your views on the.
Honorable Chair, fellow delegates, and distinguished guests, I am Neha, the delegate of USA. United States of America is grateful for the opportunity to be a part of this conference and the chance to find suitable solutions for the Israel-Palestinian conflict.
With the prior permission of the Chair and the delegates of the House, I, Shrayut, the delegate of USA, would like to put forward my opinion on today's topic. The close relationship between the US and Israel has been one of the most salient features in US foreign policy for nearly 3.5 decades. The well over $3 billion in military and economic aid sent annually to Israel by Washington is rarely questioned in Congress, even by liberals who normally challenge US aid to governments that engage in widespread violations of human rights, or by conservatives who usually oppose foreign aid in general. Virtually all Western countries share the United States' strong support for Israel's legitimate right to exist in peace and security. Yet, these same nations have refused to provide arms and aid while the occupation of land ceased in the 1967 war continued. Although US backing of successive Israeli governments, like most foreign policy decisions, is often rationalized on moral grounds, there is little evidence that moral imperatives play more of a determining role in guiding US policy in the Middle East than in any other part of the world. Thank you. Now my partner delegate will continue.
With the prior permission of the Chair and the delegates of the House, I, Sujana, the delegate of United States of America, would like to justify USA's support to Israel. The United States of America was the first country to recognize Israel as a state in 1948 and the first to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel in 2017. Israel is a great partner to the United States, and Israel has no greater friend than the United States. Americans and Israelis are united by a shared commitment to democracy, economic prosperity, and regional security. The long-standing United States priority is to promote a comprehensive and lasting solution to the Israel-Palestinian conflict. Israel's security is a long-standing cornerstone of US foreign policy. The United States' commitment to Israel's security is supported by robust defense cooperation and the 10-year $38 billion Memorandum of Understanding, that is the MOU, signed by the United States in 2016. The US-Israel economic and commercial relationship is strong, anchored by bilateral trade in goods and services annually. The US-Israel relations are codified in a number of treaties and agreements. Israel and the United States belong to a number of the same international organizations, including the United Nations, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, International Monetary Fund, World Bank, and World Trade Organization. Correspondingly, the United States has sought to resolve the Israel-Palestinian conflict, which has been a major driver of regional dynamics, balancing its support for Israel and pushing for broader regional stability. Thank you. Now, my partner delegate, Tanvi, will continue.
With the prior permission of the Chair and the delegates of the House, I, Tanvi Agadi, the delegate of the United States of America, would like to express my views on today's topic, that is the Israel-Palestinian conflict. The United States has long tried to negotiate a solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, has resulted in the two-states policy. Although the Trump administration adopted a few policies, had diverged from the main goal. Recent violence in Gaza between Israel and Palestinian militant groups was an early test to check the Biden administration's diplomatic approach to the scene. Joe Biden, the president of USA, has stressed that both Israelis and Palestinians deserve equal measures of security, democracy, as well as prosperity. Again, Joe Biden, the president of the United States of America, said that he was committed to helping Israel rebuild its infrastructure in Gaza that was devastated during the recent violence, as well as reiterated its support to the two-state solution that was earlier suggested by the UNO. The United Nations Organization, UNO, not only safeguards international peace,
international security, but also human rights for all citizens. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I am Shaurya, the delegate of USA. United States of America is looking forward for the support of UN countries beyond the borders for solutions to this international issue. Honorable President, fellow delegates, thank you very much.
Thank you, Delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any and all.
Thank you, Delegate. This delegate is open to any and all points of information. Are there any points of information to this delegate?
The Delegate of Palestine would like to pose a question.
Delegate of Palestine, you have been recognized.
Madam President, the ex-United States President Donald Trump had moved the United States Embassy to Jerusalem and also termed Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Despite knowing the fact that Jerusalem is a disputed area with sensitive population, how can the United States, a superpower, issue such a controversial statement?
Madam Chair, I would like to answer the question saying that United States President Donald Trump had accepted Jerusalem as the capital of Israel out of friendly ties with Israel for over several decades. Thank you.
Madam Chair, the Delegate of Russia would like to pose a question.
Delegate of Russia, you have been recognized.
As told by one of US's delegates, this conflict is a cornerstone for USA foreign policy. But the Biden administration has not prioritized the Israeli-Palestinian conflict on its foreign policy agenda. How can they justify this, Madam Chair?
Madam Chair, I'd like Biden administration's active engagement with the Palestinians to advance the progress towards conflict resolution. The Biden administration also exerted pressure on Israel to end the war on Gaza. It also views Israelis and Palestinians alike as parties with rights and interests. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, Delegate of Saudi Arabia would like to ask a question.
Delegate of Saudi Arabia, you have been recognized.
The Trump administration reignited controversy over the disputed region by siding with Israel on various matters, breaking decades of US policy of being neutral in negotiations. Why is this? Does the US have any strategic plans behind this?
Madam Chair, I'd like to tell that we do not have any strategic plans behind our support to Israel. We are just trying to support Israel's right to defend itself in the brutal war begun by the Hamas. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Delegate of Russia, you have 5 minutes to express your views on the topic.
Good afternoon. I'm Tanuj, the Delegate of Russia. Honorable Chair, fellow delegates, and distinguished guests, Russia is grateful for the opportunity to be a part of this conference and the chance to find suitable peaceful solutions to the escalating conflict between Israel and Palestine. Thank you.
Good afternoon. With the prior permission of the Chair and delegates of the House, I, S. Solanki, the Delegate of Russia, here to speak on the topic Palestine-Russia relation. The history of Palestine-Russia relation has been long and complex. For a number of historical and political reasons, it has been deeply interwoven with Russian relation with Israeli enterprise, Palestinian nationalism, and Third World national liberation movements in general. However, at the same time, particularly between 1956 and 1990, Soviet-Palestinian relations were also part and parcel of then ongoing Soviet-American confrontation. This relationship has continued even today. Russia remains an important player in Middle East peace process and is a member of Middle East Quartet. Thank you. Now my co-delegate, S. Jane, will continue further.
Good afternoon. With the prior permission of the Chair and the delegates of the House, I, S. Jane, the Delegate of Russia, here to speak on the topic Israel-Russia relations. Israel-Russia relations refers to the bilateral foreign relations between the two countries, Israel and Russia. Russia has an embassy in Tel Aviv and a consulate in Haifa. Israel has an embassy in Moscow and a consulate general yet to open in Yekaterinburg. Russia is a member of the Quartet on the Middle East. For many years, Israel was a sanctuary for many Russian Jews. This was especially true in the case during the Alia in the 1970s and 1990s. Israel and Russia were on opposing sides during the Cold War. However, the relationship between Israel and Russia began to improve significantly from the early 2000s onwards, with the election of the Russian leader Vladimir Putin and in 2001 with the election of the Israeli leader Ariel Sharon. Israel is part Russophone and considered to be the world's only part Russophone country outside the former Soviet Union. Russian is the third most widely spoken language in Israel after Hebrew and Arabic, and has the third largest number of Russian speakers outside the former Soviet countries, and the highest as the proportion of the total population. Over 1 lakh Israeli citizens live in Russia, with 80,000 Israelis living in Moscow, while hundreds of thousands of Russian citizens reside in Israel from around 1.5 million native Russian-speaking Israelis. Thank you. Now I request my fellow delegate to continue.
With the prior permission of the chair and the delegates of the House, I, Pani, the delegate of Russia, here to speak on the topic Russia's support. The Russian position is actually fairly standard. Many countries support Palestine and does not regard Hamas as a terrorist group. Also note that Russia does have fairly good relations with Israel, especially the Netanyahu government. This is especially true as Netanyahu and Putin share many ideological characteristics and political interests. There are well over 1 million Russians in Israel, many of them the result of outflows in the 1990s, and many of them are radically right-wing nationalists. So there is another reason for Russia and Israel to get along. Again, however, Russia's support for Palestine is not out of the norm. Many states in the world, representing about 71.5% of the world's population, recognize Palestine as a sovereign state. Note that this does not mean that they oppose Israel, just that they recognize Palestine. Now, I am here to tell you about UN's role in world affairs. UN coordinates the COVID-19 vaccination effort globally. It provides food and assistance to 97 million people in 88 countries. It supplies vaccine to 50% of the world's children, helping save 3 million lives a year. It assists and protects 97.3 million people fleeing war, famine, and persecution. It works with 196 nations to keep global temperature rise below 2 degrees Celsius. It keeps peace with 90,000 peacekeepers in 12 operations around the world. It tackles the global water crisis affecting over 2.2 billion people worldwide. It protects and promotes human rights globally through 80 treaties or declarations. Now I request my fellow delegate to continue.
Good afternoon. I am Meghna, delegate of Russia. All sides must uphold international humanitarian law and provide for full humanitarian access, and all efforts should be directed at avoiding further civilian casualties and preventing the alarming loss of life we have seen thus far. The humanitarian consequences of this latest escalation have already been considerable. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any and
Thank you, Delegate. This delegate is open to any and all points of information. Are there any points of information to this delegate?
Madam Chair, I, Sujana, the delegate of USA, would like to question the delegates of Russia.
Delegate of USA, you have been recognized.
Thank you for the recognition, Madam Chair. Russia is one of the leading intervening powers to address this long-standing Israel-Palestinian conflict. But why isn't Russia putting pressure on Israel or Palestine to change its position?
Madam Chair, I would like to assure that Russia is not putting pressure on both Israel and Palestine because Russia does have fairly good relations with both Israel and Palestine, and it is neutral, so it isn't putting any pressure on either side, but it is trying its best to solve this conflict.
Delegate of India, you have 5 minutes to express your views on the topic.
Good afternoon. With the prior permission of the Chair and the delegates of the House, I, Anjali, the Delegate of India, here to tell about the relation of India with Israel. Since the establishment of diplomatic relations between India and Israel, there has been increased cooperation in military and intelligence ventures. Prime Minister Narendra Modi became the first Indian Prime Minister to visit Palestine in 2018. Though India recognized as Israel in 1950, the two countries established full diplomatic ties only on January 29, 1992. India is among 164 United Nations member states to have diplomatic ties with Israel. India has its embassy in second largest Israeli city of Tel Aviv, Israel. Meanwhile, Israel has its embassy in Delhi. It also consulates in Mumbai and Bengaluru. India is the largest buyer of military equipment from Israel, which in turn is the second largest defense supplier to India after Russia. India is also the 10th largest trade partner of Israel. Thank you. Now here is my partner delegate to continue.
Good permission of the chair and the delegates of the House, I, Sujendra, the delegate of India, here to speak about the relation of India with Palestine. India was one of the first countries to recognize the state of Palestine in 1988. In 1996, India opened its representative office to the Palestine Authority in Gaza, which later was shifted to Ramallah in 2003. India has always played a proactive role in garnering support for the Palestinian cause in multilateral fora. The relations of India and Palestine have been largely influenced by the independence struggle against British colonialism. Although relations between India and PLO were first established in 1974, India has consistently called for a direct peace negotiations between Israel and Palestine, based on a global consensus on the end goal of a two-state solution. India voiced support for the diplomatic efforts of the Quartet and other members of international community, the countries in the region, in particular, to calm the situation and put an end to the ongoing violence and see to durable peace. Thank you. Now my fellow delegate will continue.
With the prior permission of the chair and the delegates of the House, I am Khanak, the delegate of India. India's support. At the United Nations Security Council on Sunday, India, a non-permanent member, reaffirmed its support for Palestine, but stopped short of making any direct reference to the status of Jerusalem or the future Israel-Palestine borders. In 1974, India became the first non-Arab state to recognize Palestine Liberation Organization as the sole and legitimate representative of Palestinian people. In 1988, India became one of the first countries to recognize the Palestinian state. India, on May 27, abstained from voting on the United Nations Human Rights Security Council's resolution to open an international investigation into violations with regards to the recent Gaza violence and into the systematic abuses in the Palestinian territories and Israel. The resolution was nevertheless passed with 24 of the Council's 47 members voting in favor of the probe. At the Washington's Donor Conference in October 1995, India pledged $1 million for assistance to Palestinian people. Following a visit of security delegation to India in March 1997, led by the head of Palestinian Security Forces, Major General Nasser Yousef, India offered 51 specialized security training slots to Palestinians in various disciplines during the year 1997 to 1998, which accounted for an estimated expenditure of Rs 55 lakhs. UN should take immediate action to ensure that permanent peace is established. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Are you open to any points of information?
Any and all.
Thank you, Delegate. This delegate is open to any and all points of information. Are there any points of information to this delegate?
Thank you, delegates, for putting forward your opinion. These issues which have been put forward by each one of you are daunting. But the United Nations has proven at various stages of its history that it is capable of rising to new challenges. Your support is crucial. Your voice and your organization, activity, and energy can help highlight the United Nations' successes with innovative approaches to help confront the global community. I now request UN Special Representative Ms. Neha to close today's discussion with possible solutions.
Honorable Chair, fellow delegates, and distinguished guests, the Israel-Palestinian conflict is broad and complex, and many of the issues that are key to finding peace need to be negotiated directly between Israeli and Palestinian leaders. However, there are several key issues that the United Nations and the Security Council can act on that could impact peace negotiations. Palestine 194. Palestine is applying to become the 194th member state of the United Nations. Becoming a member state would give the state of Palestine more credibility and legitimacy in the eyes of the international community, and it would help Palestinian leaders in negotiations with Israel. However, membership to the UN requires a vote by the Security Council. And historically, the US has vetoed Palestine's bid for membership. But can the Security Council find a compromise that would enable Palestine to become a member of the UN? Security concerns. Currently, the Israeli military occupies Palestine. From the Israeli point of view, this is to protect its borders, ensure national security, and prevent acts of terrorism. From the Palestinian point of view, this is a violation of Palestine's sovereignty and is seen as a show of force and intimidation. And at the same point, there are groups within Palestine that do not recognize Israel's right to exist and have committed acts of terror within Israel. Thus, it shoulders responsibility on international community to make efforts to relieve this tense situation and guarantee the security of both Israelis and Palestinians. Human rights. Palestinian leaders have accused Israel of violating the human rights of Palestinians, starting with the Israeli occupation of Palestine to Israel's refusal to recognize the right of reply of Palestinian refugees. However, various Palestinian groups have refused to recognize Israel's right to exist, and Israeli leaders believe it is their right to preserve and Israel's national security. There seems to be opportunity for Israeli and Palestinian leaders to negotiate peace, but the opportunity may not last long. It is imperative for the UN and the international community to act and help both sides find an end to this long and violent conflict. The General Assembly today concludes its annual debate on the question of Palestine and the situation in the Middle East by proposal to adopt resolutions, including one calling for a final peace settlement to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The Assembly reiterates its call for the achievement of a just, lasting solution in the Middle East and an end to the Israeli occupation, while calling on Israel, the occupying power, to comply strictly with international law, sees actions aimed at altering the demographic composition of the territory and immediately halt all settlement activities. The Assembly declares that the Israeli decision to impose its laws, jurisdiction, and administration on the occupied Syrian Golan is null and void and demands that Israel withdraw from the territory. The Assembly reiterates that any actions by Israel to impose its laws, jurisdiction, and administration on the holy city of Jerusalem are illegal and therefore null and void. It also stresses the need for the parties to observe calm and restraint and to refrain from provocative actions and calls for respect for the historic status quo at Jerusalem's holy places. The Assembly requests to continue to monitor developments relevant to the question of Palestine. Finally, we consider the parties not being just Israel and the Palestinians, but with all the countries in the surroundings and with significant implications such as the United States, as a lasting and long-term peace requires normalization and economic, social, political, and cultural bonds between the states implicated in the Accords. This will give us strength to seek a peaceful and lasting solution. Thank you.
Congratulations, delegates, for putting up this amazing conference. Unfortunately, as I think we've heard, the respective leaderships are far apart on final status issues. Israeli and Palestinian politics are fraught and trust between the two states is at a nadir. However, these realities do not relieve member states of the responsibility of trying to preserve the viability of a two-state solution. Nor should they distract from the imperative of improving conditions on the ground, especially the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The committee has proved successful in trying to arrive at solution formation. This now brings us to the end of committee session and subsequent one. I thank you all for participating so diligently, and the conference has definitely been successful. Please give yourselves a round of applause. Thank you so much. It was an absolute privilege being the chairperson of this committee. As the chairperson of Preparatory School Model United Nations 2021, I declare the conference closed. I now request Sangama to take over.
Thank you, Anushka. It is indeed an honor to have amongst us Janardhan sir, today's guest of honor. I now request Janardhan sir to address the young gathering and share his views.
Good afternoon, everyone. thrilled to be part of this MUN session. Thank you, Sangama, for that kind introduction. Wish I could be there in person, like I was at the Pupil Tree, I think about a year and a half ago, February last year. But of course, as you all know, we live in exceptional times, but thanks to technology, we are moving on with life without too many hindrances. Before I proceed, I would like you all to join me in applauding the performance of our men's and women's hockey teams at Tokyo Olympics, right? I mean, the men's team, of course, won the bronze medal, but after 40 years, the women, despite their loss this morning, have won our hearts with their spirited performance. I think they deserve a round of applause, and congratulations are also due to all our medal winners and all those who narrowly missed a place on the podium. More power to them in the future and to Indian sports in general. Well, from Olympics to Pupil Trees MUN, a big round of applause to all of you as well, to your teachers and to the school management for adapting to the pandemic and putting up such a good display of this extracurricular activity. I know that the chairperson has already declared the MUN close, but Madam Chair, I request you to allocate 7 minutes to me so that I can express my views too. Okay, there's so much that all of you young global citizens that you are have said about one of the oldest unresolved conflicts in the world, in modern history, in international relations. There's a lot more that you may have glossed over, but I'm not here to pick on your acts of omission, which are things that you may have missed out, but I'm here to commend you for your acts of commission, which is things that you have covered. What I want to do now is to basically highlight a few aspects that I think will help you understand the correlation between many important concepts that you have referred to today in your discussion. Ideology, you talked about, you spoke about religion, you spoke about politics, you spoke about diplomacy, security issues in international relations, and I want to speak about all of that a little bit, and a little bit about reforming the United Nations. Right? And I want to put all of my thoughts together through 5 messages. These messages also overlap with your lives, right? They are important life skills. They are messages for your lives too. So the first message is that peace deals don't actually achieve peace, or solutions don't always solve problems, but we must keep trying. We know that with the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, right? For 75 years, we've gone on with trying to achieve peace. We've signed several peace deals. It hasn't worked, but that doesn't mean that we need to stop. We need to keep trying. So let me explain this with a bit of an anecdote, from 1993. All of you know very well, by virtue of having studied this subject for this MUN, that in 1993, the Oslo Accord was signed between the Palestinians and Israelis. The US, though the accord itself was not discussed, the peace agreement was not discussed in the United States, it was discussed in Oslo. That's why it's called the Oslo Accord. But the peace deal itself was signed on the White House lawns in Washington. And Bill Clinton was, of course, there. There was also Yasser Arafat representing the Palestinians. And at that time, it was Yitzhak Rabin, who was the Israeli prime minister. Now, there's a very interesting episode that took place, which was narrated several times by Clinton. I don't know how many of you have read this or how many of you have heard about it, but let me just go through that a little bit, okay? So Clinton wanted a public ceremony to announce that the Palestinians, the Israelis have signed a deal, because he wanted the world to know that the 2 warring countries or warring leaders and their peoples are coming together through the Oslo Accord. So he wanted a grand ceremony. There was one problem. The 2 rival leaders had never met in public. Clinton somehow managed to convince them, but the protocol was a big issue. Rabin was a former soldier. he had fought on behalf of the Israeli army against the Arabs. He was very hesitant to meet or shake hands with an Arab leader. Arafat was ready to meet Rabin, but he said, I cannot wear a formal suit. You know that for peace deals, you need to wear a formal suit or civilian clothes, but he said, I'm going to come in my military attire. Okay, that was agreed. The next problem was Arafat usually carries a gun. So you definitely can't carry a gun to the peace agreement signing ceremony. The Americans and Clinton somehow managed to convince him, and Arafat agreed. And all this was happening as the three leaders were sitting in three different rooms in the White House, and negotiators and the White House team were running from one room to the other to sort out all these issues. Then came another problem. You know that the Arab men have a habit of kissing their guests, even if they are men. Rabin told Clinton, I don't want Arafat to try and kiss me in public. Clinton somehow finally convinced Arafat that he should not attempt this. And according to one former White House official, Clinton actually stood between the two leaders and was told to make sure that Arafat does not show Rabin too much of affection. Finally, the leaders met, and Clinton stood between the two leaders and encouraged them to shake hands, and the deal was signed. Take a look at some of the photographs on the web, and you will see that Clinton is standing right between them and encouraging the two of them to shake hands. So it's not just about negotiating a peace deal, but it's also about the theatrics behind these ceremonies, what goes on to make diplomacy tick. There are so many issues involved in how diplomacy is conducted, and this was just an example of how complicated things are, from the dress, from the sort of ties that people wear, the shaking of the hands, the body language, all of those things matter in diplomacy. So it is another matter that Oslo Accords did not eventually yield the peace dividends that the leaders were looking for, or that the world that was looking for. But our efforts to solve the dispute must continue in all earnest. And what does it say to our lives? The life skills that we must acquire is that irrespective of whether some of the solutions that we bring about to solve our own day-to-day problems serve the purpose or not, we must not stop looking for solutions. We do have problems on a daily basis. We must keep searching for solutions to answer those problems, right? So again, I mean, before I proceed to the next message, I want to add a bit of trivia here. All of you must have seen Arafat's photos, right? The headgear that he wears, the famous kife, as they call it, which is even famous after his death. It's, black and white fishnet sort of pattern. But look at the frontal portion of his kife, the headgear. It is designed like the map of Palestine. And so, it was a huge political symbol. Wherever Arafat went, he wore that headgear, and he always had his hand on the headgear to suggest that this is the map of Palestine. So take a look at those photographs to just see the political symbolism involved in that headgear. My second message is about the interconnectedness of religions and how persecuted communities work very hard and succeed. So if you have problems, you don't need to get bogged down. You don't need to, take a defensive approach. You need to work hard and solve your problems. And that's what both the Palestinians and the Israelis have done. So we know that the two religions involved in the Arab-Israeli conflict, Islam and Judaism, along with Christianity, are interconnected. The truth is that the Middle East is the birthplace of all three religions. Those who follow these religions and their prophets are all children of Abraham. So what we are seeing today is that the children of Abraham are at war with each other. In international relations, they also refer to this especially the clash of ideas between Islam and Christianity as clash of civilizations. But we are also seeing an effort to develop tolerance and unity among the three religions. For example, in the country that I live, the United Arab Emirates, and in the capital of the United Arab Emirates, Abu Dhabi, they are now building the Abrahamic family house. So it's amazing that a Muslim country is now constructing 3 places of worship, a mosque, a church, and a synagogue, which represents the worship places of the 3 religions in one place. And it's going to be called the Abrahamic family house. So another interesting point is that Palestinians are actually called the Jews of the Arab world. You know, Jews are very enterprising. I'm sure you've read Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice, right? Shylock, a Jew, very enterprising. They're known for their entrepreneurial skills, their business skills. We also know some famous Jews. I'm sure you're familiar with Albert Einstein, Steven Spielberg, Mark Zuckerberg, and there are many such Jews who are really famous. Palestinians too, I mean, that's why they're called the Jews of the Arab world. Many Arabs in the Arab world fear the Palestinians because they believe that they're so good. They're a bit like the Marwadis of the Indian communities, the business community. They're really good at their business, and they fear that they may take over the businesses in several parts of the Arab world. So the logic is, why are the Palestinians and the Israelis so good at what they are? Because they have faced a lot of adversities. They have been a persecuted lot. And usually they say that adversity and persecution brings out the best in people. And both the Palestinians and the Israelis are very good examples. So what is the message for you? When the going gets tough, the tough get going. The harder you work, the better your futures. And don't get bogged down by difficulties. You need to find ways to overcome your challenges and difficulties, and you need to move forward. My third message is about perception. Perception, what you think of the other. It's very important. So the Palestinian delegates accuse the Israelis of acts of violence. The Israeli delegates on the MUN session accuse the Palestinians of terrorism. So I hope you were able to think that one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. To the Arab and Muslim world at large, Palestinians fighting Israelis are freedom fighters, and those who die for their cause are martyrs. To Israel and many other countries in the world, they are terrorists. Now try and link to some of the things that are happening in India, right? The Kashmir issue, for example, and the India-Pakistan row. Indians are always thinking of Pakistanis as being the culprits, and the Pakistanis are thinking about the Indians as culprits. Nationalism, basically, the country that you belong to, defines your stand. Who is a freedom fighter and who is a terrorist? If you're an Indian, you will brand those seeking to liberate Kashmir as a terrorist, and those fighting to liberate Palestine as a freedom fighter. Strange, isn't it? Those coming across the border are terrorists, but those fighting the cause of the Palestinians against Israel are freedom fighters. So this is what perception is all about. And I want to give you another example to convey my message about perception or misperception. We are often told that the person of the other religion is more extremist than our own religion. There are so many titles doing the rounds, right? We have Muslim fundamentalists, we have right-wing Hindus, we have Christian supremacists, fanatic Jews. These are some of the terms that have also been used during the course of the conversation and the discussion. Yes, of course they exist. We are all having extremist ideas in our own minds. If we think of violence, we are extremist. If we abuse someone, we are extremist. But who is really causing damage to other religions? Are other religions causing damage to our religion? Is our religion causing damage to other religions? Or are we causing damage to our own religion? Let me give you examples. Who killed Martin Luther King? A Christian. He was killed by a Christian. Who killed Yitzhak Rabin? A fanatic Jew. Who killed Mahatma Gandhi? So think before you blame the other. There's something called Miles' Law. Miles' Law says, where you stand depends on where you sit. So today, some of you were delegates of Palestine. So you were speaking on behalf of the Palestinians. You were almost convinced by reading that the Palestinians are good. Similarly, those sitting on the Israeli side and representing Israel, the Israeli delegates, were convinced that what they were doing to fight the Palestinians is right. Suppose, imagine in the next MUN, next year, you are asked to swap places. How would you react? How would you go about arguing your case? So what this means basically is where you stand depends on where you sit. It means that your stand on any issue can change depending on where you are. Again, link this to what's happening in India. The Indian Parliament, you know that the Indian Parliament over the last 3 weeks has hardly debated in the way it should be debating crucial issues. There has been the boycott of the Parliament, disruption of the Parliament, all of that. The opposition party's position on certain issues today is most likely to change when they become part of the government. And the issues that the government is supporting today, they opposed it when they were in the opposition. So you see, that's why I said where you stand, the stand that you take on a certain topic, on a certain issue, depends on where you sit. If you're in the opposition, you react differently. If you're in the government, you react differently. When you're students, you're upset about what your teachers and what your parents tell you. But if you were to become a teacher and a parent, you would be reacting completely in a different way. So the point is, nothing is black and white. Don't believe what you hear and see just like that. Pause, think. Most often things are gray. It's neither black nor white. It's gray. Truth is that gray. It lies in between black and white. Truth is never black and white. It's always gray. It's somewhere in between. I'm sure many of you have heard that famous Kannada saying, and most of you would know Kannada. So, nodiddu sullagabahudu, keliddu sullagabahudu, nidanisi yochisidaga nijavu teliyuvudu. Right? There was that song which was picturized, and it's really etched in my memory. I must have seen it when I was in grade 3, 4, or 5. A song which depicts, how a mother goes out, the mongoose versus snake fight. The song is basically picturized, between a fight between a mongoose and a snake. A mother sees the blood stain, the mouth of a mongoose outside the house when she returns after fetching water. And she thinks that it is the blood of her child. So she runs inside, and before doing so, she actually kills the mongoose with the pot of water that she has. When she runs inside, she sees the child playing in the cradle. The child is hale and hearty. And near the cradle is the dead snake. So the mongoose had actually saved the baby by killing the snake. But the mother did not think before she acted in killing the mongoose. She thought the mongoose had actually killed her child or had harmed her child. So, nodiddu sullagabahudu, keliddu sullagabahudu, nidanisi yochisidaga nijavu teliyuvudu. So that's my message 3. My 4th message is about new hope. A new hope of some sort of a new effort for peace. So we've seen that the Palestinian-Israeli cause has really not moved forward. Peace deals have not worked. We've had continuous confrontation between the two. But amid this negativity, we had the signing of the Abraham Accord. In September 2020, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Israel signed the Abraham Accord. This marks a major departure from hate towards a new era of cooperation. It may not solve the Palestinian-Israeli problem, but we must also remember that we should not let historic baggage, things from the past, to hinder future progress, right? India has always been under pressure to choose sides. I think we need to recognize India's foreign policy here. We have often been told that you're either with Israel or with the Arabs. You cannot be with both. That's been the common criticism about Indian foreign policy. But now it appears that even the Arab countries and Israel are following the Indian foreign policy. They're trying to play the balancing role. They're on both sides. So Indian foreign policy has got friends with most, is friends with most. Indian foreign policy is friends with most, enemies with very few, right? It's very sophisticated. If you think India has good ties with the United States and with Russia, it is good with Israel on one side and Palestinians on the other. It is good with Iran on one side and Saudi Arabia and the UAE on the other. And we all know that most of these countries are rivals. So India has managed to play a very, very sophisticated diplomatic game in trying to balance ties among countries which are rivals between or among themselves. And for the record, I'm sure I just want to reiterate what the Indian delegate said, that the Indian government has maintained good ties both with the Palestinians and the Israelis. But our support for the Palestinian cause actually goes back even before Indian independence, even before the formation of Israel, the creation of Israel itself, when Mahatma Gandhi in 1938 said Palestine belongs to the Arabs in the same sense that England belongs to the English or France belongs to the French. So I think that's important to remember. And I want to introduce a nice concept to you out here, a nice concept that is doing the rounds in international relations these days, and it's called rivalry partners. Remember that term, rivalry partners. Because you don't have to always be friends to partner with someone. You can be rivals and still partner. You can have a common agenda among rivals and still work together to achieve your end objective. You can have cooperative competition. You can have competitive cooperation. You can see that in your class, right? You're all one class. You are competing for grades, you're competing in sports, but it's all in good spirit at the end of the day. You still cooperate. I think we need more of that. There's another concept that we talk about nowadays, a combination of the word friend and enemy. Frenemy, they're calling it. Frenemies. You can be frenemies. You can be friends with your enemy. So what I'm trying to suggest to you, like it is in foreign policy, we must avoid confrontation. We must promote cooperation. Have more friends than enemies. Build partnerships. Be positive in your approach. That's my fourth message. My final message is about the United Nations. You know, the United Nations has received more criticism than appreciation, I think, over a period of time. It may not have solved all the problems of the world, but the truth is that it has at least prevented the breakout of World War III, right? I mean, that's why the United Nations was formed to ensure that we don't have another world war. As you would know, the League of Nations failed to stop the Second World War. The United Nations has somehow managed to prevent the outbreak of a third war, and that is a big achievement. So anytime you hear criticism about the United Nations, take it with a pinch of salt, but remember that it has prevented a World War III. But all is not well with the United Nations. It has to undergo urgent reform. Why? So currently, we are still in the post-World War II era. The United Nations Security Council, which is represented by 5 countries, actually represents only 2.5 billion people. The 5 permanent Security Council members represent only 2.5 billion people. And you know the world population is 7 billion people. So they represent basically 1/3 of the world population. And China itself represents 1.5 billion people. So which means the other 4 countries on the UN Security Council represent just 1 billion people. So which means nearly 5 billion people are not part of the Permanent Security Council. Most of Asia, all of Africa, South America is unrepresented. And the economic power of the unrepresented countries is more than 50% of the global GDP. I'm sure all of you know the global GDP, right? I mean, GDP, gross domestic product, that is what tells you the strength of a country, strength of the world economy. Asia actually contributes 35% to the global GDP, and yet it has only 1 member. So even today, we survive in a post-World War II era. The institutions that were created after World War II, the countries that were leading the world in the 1940s, still continue to dominate the world. I mean, there's something called the Bretton Woods institutions. Bretton Woods institutions, because Bretton Woods was the name of a place in the United States which created the terms and conditions for the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. And can you believe it, in this time and age when Asia, Africa, and South America are also doing well, you still need to be an American citizen to become a World Bank chief. You still need to be an European to become IMF chief, International Monetary Fund. So I think there's a lot of change that we must try and work towards in reforming the United Nations, in reforming the world order, and in reforming some of the global institutions that we have. And I'm sure all of you know that India is a leading activist for change and is one of the top contenders for the permanent membership of the United Nations. And irrespective of whether this happens or not in the near future, India should continue being an activist, continue to try and, obtain a place at the Security Council table. The UN is still important. Whether all of this happens for India or not, the United Nations is important. And I don't know if you are aware, but it's also a very, very important moment for India. This month, during August, India is holding the rotating presidency of the United Nations Security Council. So as we speak, India is the president of the United Nations Security Council for this one month. So what is the message for all of you? The same as what was said at the beginning of the discussion. The importance of MUN, the importance of the United Nations lies in it being a platform for teamwork, for cooperation, for peace, for collective action. And I'm sure you're all aware of the old saying, united we stand, divided we fall. So that's the sort of spirit that you need to carry on. So those are my 5 messages to you. I hope you'll be able to recollect them in some form and try to apply it in your own lives. And to end, I just want to touch on a few things in terms of saying that irrespective of what your subject choices are or what your career choices will be in the future, please pay attention to local political and economic news and international political and economic news, because the local affects the international affects the local. You should be watching news, paying a little bit of attention to the political, international, economic, political, and security dimensions that are taking place. Please pay attention to it, because this is what is going to give you knowledge. And you know that knowledge is power. And remember, there's a difference between education and knowledge. Education is what you learn in school. Knowledge is what you learn maybe a little bit in school, but much more outside school. And the more knowledgeable you are, the better equipped you are to deal with your educational requirements and to move ahead in life. These are life skills. You know, it's a bit like all of you eat good food, but you're also asked to drink extra milk, eat extra fruits, even take vitamin tablets. So education is like that basic food, and knowledge is like those supplements. Moving forward, remember, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Stay strong, stay healthy, study well, play lots, and have even more fun. I think school is the best part to have fun. Don't forget to have fun in the midst of all the other activities that you have. And if possible, I said this to one of the classes that I spoke to while I was at Pupil Tree a year and a half ago. Try and follow the 888 rule, 888. 8 hours of study, 8 hours of sleep, and 8 hours of fun. That's a perfect formula for a good and healthy life. 8 hours of study, 8 hours of fun, and 8 hours of rest. Okay, so bear that in mind. Tough, I know, to follow it, but try hard. So once again, I would like to congratulate you, your teachers, the school management for pulling this MUN event off in such good fashion amid this troubling pandemic. I thoroughly enjoyed your contribution, your interjections, your comments, your arguments, and I wish you the very best as you move forward. Thank you for your patience. Back to you.
Thank you, sir. Indeed, your words will greatly guide us. Now, I request Avikshit to please share his MUN experience and give us some tips.
Okay, so first of all, let me say that it was a really great discussion, and I was really impressed by all the points put forward by the delegates. And it's also very interesting because given the sensitivity of the topic in the region I'm in, which is the Middle East, we were not allowed to discuss this in school, especially in our MUN conferences. So I actually learned a lot, and all of you were well rehearsed in your points. You knew what you were saying, and it looked like you prepared really well. One thing I noticed though was you were very history heavy when introducing the topic, and everyone more or less gave different variations of the same history, and I feel like you should have imposed more of your country's stance in the topic rather than giving historical context, because ultimately that's what MUN is about, you know. And I'm also glad to see that everything was discussed in a very civilized manner, unlike the real politicians of both sides who accuse each other in the most hostile manner, even with bombs and guns. And here's like a funny story I want to share from one of my personal conferences, that as I was a chair, it went out of control and the delegates were calling for war. And I'm like, whoa, I don't know what to do. And I had to get the teachers for help. And I'm glad that this didn't happen over here. But overall, it was a very good conference and really eye-opening. And I'm glad that all of you put so much time and effort into this. Thank you.
Thank you. That was really helpful and will help us to perform better in the upcoming MUN sessions. Now, my friend Anushka will continue.
Thank you, Sangama. The best part of this year's MUN session is the golden opportunity to interact with our guests, Dr. Janardhan and Master Avikshat. With your permission, sir, my friends would like to know more about the topic, related issues, or yourself by asking few questions.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Firstly, I would invite Anurag to go ahead with this question.
Namaste, sir. In your opinion, Janardhan, sir, can diplomats made be by training or certain innate qualities are a prerequisite?
Yeah, no, very good question. So I actually train diplomats in my current job. And many of them ask the question, can we be trained? I'm not so sure, right? I mean, can you really be trained to be an engineer and a doctor, a pilot, or a chartered accountant, or a sports person? If the answer is yes, then diplomats can also be trained. If the answer is no, then I don't think you can really be trained. I think it all depends on your interest, really. I'm sure some of you have certain ideas about what you want to do in your lives, but you may be under pressure of some sort to pursue a certain career, in which case you won't be doing your best. You may become an engineer, doctor, chartered accountant, pilot, or a sports person, but if it is your real desire to become one of that, you will do well. If it is under pressure, you may not do so well. The same is the case of a diplomat. I mean, you can't make leaders, right, at the end of the day. There has to be an inherent quality, an inherent interest in you to become a leader, to become a diplomat, to become whatever you want to become. Unless you have that interest, you're not going to really be able to achieve success. So, I mean, we are all diplomats in our own life, in real life too, right? I mean, when you have two friends quarreling over something, I'm sure you have tried to mediate between them. So in that sense, you're already a diplomat. When there is some sort of a, domestic fight between brothers, siblings, parents intervene. So parents are diplomats. Teachers intervene in problems between students. They are diplomats. So we're all diplomats in our own life. So if we like the job of mediating and becoming a diplomat, I think we can do. So diplomats have to be multidisciplinary, in terms of having good communication skills, good knowledge of history, good knowledge of foreign policy, good knowledge of politics, and not just that. They must be well versed in many other things like having good humor. You can't always convey messages and solve problems by being very strict. You need to have humor. Like they say, a diplomat's job is actually sending someone to hell, but trying to make sure that the path is as if it's heading towards heaven. So you sugarcoat the pathway and make the person believe that he's heading to heaven, but you actually send him to hell. Or it could be the other way around too. So it's that sort of a thing. But yes, I think diplomats to some extent can be trained, and schools and institutions like the one that I'm working in tries to help them with acquiring new skills. So that's why I said it's not just education, it's knowledge. So we have courses that teach them about diplomatic history. It teaches them about, international relations, international law, but we also have physical classes like simulations like the ones that you just had, MUN, Model United Nations. So we give them topics, we ask them to debate, we ask them to wear the caps of other countries, talk about their foreign policies, learn from that. We have courses on etiquettes and protocols, how to shake hands, how to sit, how to eat with forks and spoons in the best possible manner, how to place your fork and spoon at the end of the meal to convey that you have already eaten. So there is a lot that comes naturally. You know who is a good athlete naturally, right? A well-built person, muscular, is good for a certain sport, but he or she needs to go through the training. Somebody is good in math, somebody is good in English, somebody is good in geography, somebody is good in languages. But just being good is not enough. You need to train even more. So along with your basic skills, additional training is important for whatever your career choices are.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, sir. I am Shreyas. Janardhan, sir, the world has already witnessed 2 devastating wars. And in this scenario, how important do you think the role of a diplomat is in maintaining world peace?
Absolutely. I mean, very good question again. Who has ensured that we haven't had a World War III? It is the international governments, it is diplomats, it's the leaders of the world, it's the United Nations, many other small organizations, civil societies, NGOs. They've all done fantastic work in ensuring that problems don't go beyond the point of management, right? I mean, so diplomats have played very, very important roles. They have championed the cause of peace. They have worked hard, I mean, look at any global diplomat and they are constantly traveling the world. I mean, they're not traveling there on a holiday. They're traveling by night, getting to places in the morning, attending meetings after meetings, and then getting back to their place of work again. So I think diplomats have really done a wonderful job in ensuring that the world has not seen another major crisis like the World War I and II. Of course, diplomats have also failed, and diplomats don't have magic wands in their hands, right? I mean, they can't just go say swish, abracadabra, and solve the problem and it's solved. No, that's not what is happening. It's a very, very painful negotiating process. Sometimes they succeed, sometimes they don't succeed. Just like ourselves, we put in a lot of effort. We don't always get the results that we expect or the results that we desire in our exams. So too, diplomats go through exams and tests on a regular basis. Sometimes they succeed, sometimes they fail. But again, like I said already, the UN has succeeded in avoiding World War III. We must give credit to the United Nations. We must give credit to the diplomats of the world for playing a more constructive role than a destructive role.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Gurudhan. I would like to know from student observer Avakshit, sir, as you have been part of several MUN sessions, which according to you was the most challenging topic according to you?
So according to me, the most challenging topic was the proliferation of weaponry to children, especially since I was the delegate of the United States, where guns among the youth are very common. So it was obviously really tough time because I was getting attacked from all sides, and I had to really be well prepared in my research in order to counter all the questions. So that, according to me, was the toughest.
Thank you, sir.
No problem.
Good afternoon, Janardhan, sir. Myself, Karthik. So my question to you is that will the future of India-Pakistan relations will result in another Israel-Palestinian conflict causing imbalance in this part of Asia?
I was so taken in by your gear, by the dress that you're wearing, that I almost didn't hear your question. Can you please repeat the question?
Yes, sir. Will the future of India-Pakistan relations will result in another Israel-Palestinian conflict causing imbalance in this part of Asia?
It really depends. I don't think so. I'm more of an optimist than a pessimist. I think the worst is over between India and Pakistan. It can't get any worse than it is already. I mean, how much worse can it get? We are not, the governments are not talking to each other, or we have very, very little informal contact between the two governments. We've accused each other of all sorts of, attacks in one form or the other. We are not directly trading with each other. We are trying to pull down each other in the international forums already. So can it get worse than this? I don't think so. So the worst case scenario would be the same sort of rivalry between the two countries will continue. The best case scenario would be that things will begin to improve from here, right? I don't think we will have another war. I mean, if you were to take the example of what happened between India and China at the border, it could have so easily disintegrated into a war, right? But we didn't see a war between China and India. We had problems between India and Pakistan over the last 3-4 years. We've seen that there have been major accusations. There have been major attacks by the Indian army in the Pakistani territory, and yet it didn't descend into war. So I don't think war is a likely scenario in the future. That's unlikely to happen. Yes, ideologically, the problems will continue. We have a historic baggage. The problem between India and Pakistan is not so much about Hindu and Muslim. It's more about partition. The partition baggage has created the Hindu-Muslim divide, which politicians will continue to use. And we will have those sort of problems recurring again and again. But I don't think it will have a larger impact on India-Pakistan relations. Moving forward, Asia has many, many mechanisms to solve internal problems. China is, of course, on the side of Pakistan. India is working with United States. United States, India, Japan, and Australia are trying to counter China. So the India-Pakistan rivalry is actually having an impact on India-China relations. So the world is always going to be divided. There are always going to be partnerships. There are always going to be alliances, some supporting India, some supporting Pakistan. But the world is also realizing, like I just told you, that you can have rivalry partners. You can be frenemies. You can be friends with somebody and still have some sort of enmity. I mean, we are often seeing those sort of situations, right? We are having Pakistanis come over to India for heart surgeries. So there's always that spirit of cooperation which will keep problems between India and Pakistan under control, which will not impact the wider relations in Asia. I don't want to tell you that India has more number of friends on its side as opposed to Pakistan, or Pakistan has more number of friends on its side to oppose India. No, that's not the way we should be seeing it. We should be seeing it in the spirit of how to solve this problem, because this is a political problem, like I say. I mean, at the end of the day, just imagine in your own minds, if both Pakistan and India don't spend as much money, or for example, the Palestinians and the Israelis, or the Americans and the Russians, or China too, if they don't spend as much on the defense budgets as they're spending today, and instead put that same sort of money into education, into health, into social welfare, won't this be a better world? Right? I mean, that's an idealist world, but you as children should be idealist, right? You should not be thinking in terms of ideology. You should be thinking in terms of how the world will be a better place, not in terms of how you must support a certain country against the other. So from an idealist perspective, from a romantic perspective, from a non-ideological perspective, I think the India-Pakistan affair will not get out of hand. The India-Pakistan affair can be equated with the Arab-Israeli conflict. We have all had wars on that side, the Arab-Israeli wars, the India-Pakistan wars. We've had it. But the good thing is that we haven't had major wars in the recent past. There have been attacks, there have been casualties, but diplomacy is again at work. And many, many Asian countries also realize that if they don't keep the India-Pakistan conflict under control, if they don't keep the India-China conflict under control, if they don't keep the Arab-Israeli conflict under control, it will prove to be a disaster for them also. Not just for Asia, for the entire world. So we often see that even small countries like United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, which are trying to resolve the out there on the table, you never know when there is going to be a new situation which will develop into some sort of a war or friction. But the job of the diplomats, the job of the countries which are not involved in a conflict is to ensure that the others don't get into war.
Thank you, sir.
My question is not something about diplomat, something about a conflict. My question is that who was your inspiration, who inspired you to choose this?
Okay, who was my inspiration to choose this field? I've not been inspired by someone to choose this field, but I've had several inspiring people who have motivated me in life. And I always believe, and I think it's a good lesson for you too, don't always have just one hero in your life or one heroine in your life, right? I mean, be it a man or a woman, I think it's always good to have more than one hero in your life. To be gender neutral, I think we can use heroes for both men and women, just as they use actors now for a hero and a heroine. I think you should have as many heroes as possible in your life, because no one is perfect. Every hero has a villain side in him or her, and every villain has a touch of heroism in him or her, right? In him or her. So I think try and pick out the good qualities around you, be it your parents, be it your friends, be it your teachers, be it sports people, be it actors, be it, Nobel laureates, whoever it is. There is something good in everybody. Try and pick out something but I think your first line of heroes are always your parents, right? I mean, your parents are the ones who have really worked hard to help you get on with life. So your parents are your first line of heroes. And then they say that your teachers are your parents outside home because you spend so much time in schools. Your teachers then become your second line of heroes, and so on and so forth. So try and pick the best out of all of them. And, it's a cocktail in life. It's like a fruit salad. And you have to mix it with ice cream. And the ice cream is, I think, your own character in a sense. So mix it all together and make the best fruit punch, fruit salad, or a cocktail drink that you enjoy the most.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, sir. This is Naini. Sir, you are an author of 500 articles and 4 books, which is really astounding. But as all writers, you too must have faced writer's block once in your lifetime. So, sir, how did you overcome it?
Yeah, no, it's interesting, right? How many of you have been following the story about what's happening in the Olympics with the American gymnast Biles? I forgot her first name, but her second name is Biles. And just go and take a look at what it is. She's somebody who is won, 20 or 25 medals over the last 2 or 3 Olympics. And this Olympics, she had a mental block. And she didn't participate in most of the events. Right. So I think mental blocks happen with everybody. We all go through that. But can you imagine that if a daily wage worker has a mental block or even a physical difficulty, what happens to his or her life? I mean, he or she will not be able to earn her living for that day, right? So yeah, some of us intellectuals, can talk about mental blocks. We can take a day off and say, I'm not in a mood for writing. But if it's really demanding, if it's challenging, and if I have to deliver at the end of the day, I'm sure all of you have also faced mental blocks, especially before exams, during exams, ahead of your, submitting of assignments. You don't feel like doing that assignment on that day, but if you have a deadline hanging over your head, you have no choice but to overcome that mental block and deliver, right? Your life depends on your marks at this stage in life. And my job depends on whether I deliver that article at the appointed deadline or not. So I do it. Yes, mental blocks do happen. And that I think is mostly due to exhaustion, due to stress, due to trying to put in more than you can at times. So it's important to achieve a balance. And I haven't really faced too many of those mental blocks. But like I said, if I have a target ahead of me, if I have a goal ahead of me, and I have to deliver it with or without mental block, I have to continue with it. Just imagine the plight of a doctor, of a teacher. A teacher comes to class and says, I can't take class today because I have a mental block. I'm sure all of you will enjoy it, but the fact is that the teacher can't do that, right? At the end of the day, a doctor can't say he or she has a mental block when she's checking on you or he's checking on you. So yes, we all face adversities, but the important thing is how we overcome it. If we do have time on our side, if we have the luxury on our side, we can take a short break, overcome that mental block and pursue our interests. But if we don't have that luxury, we just have to go about doing our business. Imagine if parents told us we have mental block and we can't do what we are supposed to do. I don't think that's that's possible, right? So you will face those situations, but like I said, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. You need to overcome it.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, sir. I'd like to pose a question to the student observer, Avikshit. How, as students, could we take part in pushing through peace deals both domestically or internationally, so our leaders realize that the future citizens are for peace and not war at any cost of human lives and disappearances?
Okay, that is a very interesting question, and to be honest, it's caught me off guard. But what I would like to say is that the best way to garner attention from the leaders is to organize protests or petitions, launch social media accounts where you promote a certain issue. And I think in this way, because let's face it, we are more experienced in technology than the oldies. So I think that this is the best way, especially in today's world when technology has become a big part of our life. Like, it's very easy to garner attention now with just one simple hashtag or one simple post on a public forum. So I think as student leaders, that will be the best way to show the big leaders out there what exactly we are standing for.
Thank you, Avikshit.
No problem.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Ritika. So, in this multipolar world, do you think that the aspiring nations and populations are adequately represented in the UN?
No, they're not. And I think that's why we need to reform the United Nations. The world has changed. The world that was when the United Nations came to life and the world that we are living in are completely different. You have had a major churn in the global world order. The global world order is going through a major change. Yes, the United States is still the most powerful country in the world, but we are beginning to see a lot of challenges to the role of the United States. We are seeing Russia constantly knock on the doors of the United States. We are seeing China knock on the United States. And let's not forget, today it's not just the countries of the world which determine policies. We have a host of non-state actors, terror groups. We have NGOs, civil society organizations. We have multinational companies. So let me give you a nice little acronym that you will remember. How many of you have heard of FANG? F-A-A-N-G. FANG, think technology, and you will start realizing what FANG stands for. FANG stands for Facebook, Amazon, Alphabet, Netflix, Google, right? FANG. Sorry, I said Alphabet, Apple. So Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google. Together, those 5 companies are worth between $3 and $5 trillion. $3 and $5 trillion is the economy of India, Japan, and Germany. All of them have economies which range in the $3 to $5 trillion range. So just 5 companies can actually determine today whether a government follows certain rules or not. They can put so much pressure. So it's not just countries which are having the power to determine whether changes can be brought about or not. It's also NGOs. Who is leading the fight for, fight against global warming? The climate change activists are much more out in the open civil society. Greenpeace, for example, they lead a much better campaign around in the world fighting for, environmental issues than governments do. So today it's a hodgepodge. They call it, to use a good word that you will use, I'm sure all of you visited multiplexes before the pandemic to watch films, right? And your parents will tell you that during their times, we didn't have multiplexes. We had one big cinema hall, which accommodated 500 people. Today, the same cinema hall has been converted into 5 small multiplexes. So that's the way the world is. It was just one superpower in the world, which was the United States. Today, that one superpower has been broken up, or the power that it had has been broken up among many others. So if you want to explain how the world looks today, you can use that theater and multiplex analogy. Example, the United States was that one big theater. Today, you have the United States, you have China, you have Russia. India is also playing a role. You have, multinational companies, you have non-state actors, terror groups, you have civil society organizations. All of them are multiplexes. And all of them are doing their own bit to make sure that the world is somehow on the right track rather than on the wrong track. So it's good, right, at the end of the day, because if you have only one leader, one party, one country, which is calling all the shots, it doesn't work well. That's really not democracy. Democracy means that you have more players sharing power, more players involved in the decision-making process, and more opinions. Is one idea better than 10 ideas? Of course. Is one idea better than a class full of ideas? Of course. So I think the world will be a much better place if we have a better distribution of power centers and more countries involved in the decision-making process.
Thank you, sir.
I would like to ask Mr. Janardhan, sir, what can India do to have better relation with West East Asia than China? And can you please highlight 5 points to achieve this?
I hope the Indian government is not listening to me when I give you the answer. Yeah, no, I mean, look, there's several things that we can do. And the first thing that I already mentioned to you is not to have a completely confrontationist approach to any problem that you have. So I think India is already doing the right thing. Number one is to treat China as a frenemy. I think that's what it's doing. While we are negotiating on issues related to the border, on issues related to trade, etc., we have also made sure that we have not shut the doors on further cooperation. Our territory is important. Our economic interests are important. We will not compromise on that. But at the end of the day, we have not ruled out further negotiations, further partnerships with China. So that's number one. Number two, my advice would be not to always side with the United States when it comes to China issues, because the sort of confrontation that the United States and China are having is very different from the sort of confrontation that India and China are having, right? The issues are totally different. The United States doesn't want China to compete with it because the United States is the number one global power. China is the number two global power. It's knocking on America's doors. And so it has a reason to fight against China. India is China's neighbor. If you create trouble with China, you already have problems with Pakistan. You create problems with China. You already have problems with China too. Do you want more problems with China? No. So it's much better to have friends as your neighbors rather than enemies. And then don't rely on a distant friend. America is 3,500 kilometers away. Is it going to solve your problems if you have a problem in the neighborhood? No. So while America is important to help you overcome crisis situations, don't forget to make friends with your enemies in the neighborhood, both Pakistan and China. So that's point number two. Number three, I think despite all the problems, make sure economic engagement continues. Right? Even, I don't know how many of you know that despite India, Pakistan not having direct economic relations, they continue to trade through third countries. So Indian products come to Dubai, for example, and from Dubai, it goes as if it is Dubai's exports to Pakistan. So Indian products actually make its way into Pakistan. And I'm sure in some ways, Pakistani products also makes its way into India. Same with China. A lot of Chinese products, because you and I are interested in the cost of a product. We are not interested in where it's made. Right? So if you're going to get a product cheap, you're going to buy it. You're not worried about where it's made. So it's important to keep trade engagement going, because when you have trade engagement, you are going to make sure that there is one channel of negotiation, one channel of diplomacy open. You may have political problems, but your economic engagement is continuing. Number four, people-to-people ties. Very, very important. Cultural ties. They call it soft power, because hard power is military. Soft power is culture. Despite all the problems that are happening, do you know that movies like Dangal, movies like PK, I'm sure you watched all of these movies, right? These movies are being dubbed into Chinese language and they're very popular in China, right? Don't stop Chinese from visiting India. You don't stop visiting China. You must go and see what China is, right? I mean, often we think that China and India are in a race. Believe me, they're not in a race. China is way, way ahead of the race. I mean, if you go and see Shanghai, it's no less than any other Western city. It's almost like Chinese are good at replicating things, right? We often joke saying that Chinese copy very well. But even for copying, you need creativity. There's a lot that we can learn from China. So let's not forget that. And that will happen not just between interaction of politicians and diplomats, it will also happen between people, between culture. So I think there's a lot that we can learn. And number 5 is related to number 4 in a sense, which is learning from China in how to achieve success. Yes, politically, we are very different, right? There are so many things that work well for China. China is not a democracy. It's very easy for China to achieve progress because if the government decides on doing something, it can do it. Whereas India is a democracy. We have our own problems. We have politics. We have political parties. We have elections. We have activism. We have NGOs, which sometimes obstruct the path to progress. I mean, we shouldn't blame them really, because they're all doing a democratic job in raising the concerns of a certain section of the society, which may actually not benefit from all the progressive steps taken by the government. So what is it that has helped China? It's a willingness to learn, a reform of the education sector, adapting technology as a solution to all the problems, and a desire to go about achieving success. I think that's really the key, because just in 40 years, China is, of course, celebrating 100 years of the Communist Party this year, but it's only 41 years since China began its reform program. And when it began its reform program, India and China's GDP was the same. In 40 years today, China's GDP is $13 trillion. India's GDP is just under $3 trillion. Where did we go wrong? Where did they get it right? I think there's a lot that we can learn from China, and we must learn. We must have that open-mindedness, because the problems that China had are the problems that we have. China was able to remove 800 people out of poverty in the last 40 years. Nearly 1 billion people have come out of poverty in China. We have similar demographics. We have a vast majority of our country waiting to get out of difficulties, waiting to get out of poverty, hoping for a better life. And we must learn from successful models in terms of how we can solve our own problems. Like ourselves, we must learn from others and their habits and their good character and their qualities to overcome the weaknesses in ourselves, right? So those are my 5 points.
Thank you so much, sir.
Good afternoon, sir. I would like to ask a question to Avikshit, sir. Sir, we were told that you will be going to the US to obtain a degree in sports management, and that also you have participated in various MUN sessions. How did you manage to balance your sports life and your academic life?
Okay, now that's a really good question too. To be honest, it didn't take that much of an effort because the MUN aspect along with my sports life were totally different schedules for me. So there was always that one part of the day where I allocated to sports and nothing else. And I obviously took care of MUN for the remaining part of the day, you know. So if you are well organized, it doesn't take that much of an effort to balance your different aspects along with MUN. And also when you do a bunch of MUNs, what happens is you get pretty experienced and you're able to put less effort into doing it because you're already well prepared and you know exactly what to do.
Thank you, sir.
No problem.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Lakshmi VN and my question is to Janardhan, sir. Sir, you're the sports person, an author, an editor, an educator. You're a lot of things, sir. You're also an active supporter of the UN reformation. So what is your greatest achievement till now? What is your most proud moment?
That's a tough question. Yeah, look, I mean, you're only as good as others make you feel, right? I mean, you're reading out all these things about what I have done, which is on my CV, which is important. I mean, I'm also a marketing kind of guy. I have to market myself. I mean, you never buy a product if you don't advertise that product well, right? So I have to have all this on my CV for Pupil Tree to invite me to be a chief guest. If I have not written 4 books and if I have not written 500 articles, the management at Pupil Tree will not invite me. So that's only one aspect of it. That's my professional life. You know, they always tell you that never believe that what you're doing and what you have done is great. Believe that that's not good enough. You must have the hunger to do more. I'm sure most of you who are cricket followers know Harsha Bogle. Harsha Bogle is a commentator. He's fantastic. He's one of India's best. Non-cricketing. He doesn't play cricket himself, or he's not a first-class cricketer. He's actually, I think, an engineer and an MBA graduate. But his cricket commentary and his technical expertise is so good that he can actually surpass many cricketers themselves. So he was once asked, how do you feel when you look at yourself in the mirror? Do you tell yourself that you are the best commentator in India? And he said, if I do that, that will be the starting day of my downfall. Because when you think you're very good, you don't have the desire to do more. You must feel that you're not good enough. Don't be overconfident. Don't be less confident either, right? Have the hunger to learn more. And that's the sort of principle that I have, you know, tried to cultivate. It's part of your living. I mean, you know, over a period of time, 25 years down the line, you can also say that I have done so many projects, I have done this, I have done this, I have done this. So I think age has helped me acquire several of those tags that you mentioned. But the proudest moment, I think, is I have tried to actually remain, it's a struggle because, you know, in today's world, everybody is talking about what they've achieved, right? You people know yourselves. You're all in the social media world. You're watching a movie and you take a clip of the movie and you post it on social media. I'm watching a movie. I'm eating mangoes. I have done this. I have done that. You know, these are really not achievements, but you are already putting that on social media to tell the world that you're doing something. Of course, you also put things on the social media when you have achievements. I have scored this, I have achieved this, I have achieved that. But it's a very competitive world. Unless you put things out there, you cannot really move forward. Nobody will give you a job just by being a champion in your house. You got to advertise. Right? Today, it's a world of advertisement. It's a world of marketing, unfortunately. But let's not forget that in going about trying to advertise your achievements, in trying to showcase your talent, let's not forget that we are all humble human beings. Right? That's very important. Don't forget, always remain humble. And I have had to fight. I mean, it's so easy when you read all these things out. I tell myself, don't believe them. When they say good, don't believe them. When they say bad, don't believe them. Look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, good, bad? And it's like that black and white and gray story that I told you, right? The truth is always somewhere in between. You're neither very good nor are you very bad. You're somewhere in between. And I always tell myself, you're somewhere in between. Stay humble and give back something to society. We came from very humble beginnings. My parents really struggled, worked hard, and gave me the best of education, gave me the opportunities to move ahead in life. I've done a lot better. My father studied in a Kannada medium village school. He put me in an English school, in a public school. I'm sure it's the same story with most of your parents, most of your lives. And I have been able to put Avikshit in an international school. And with each step, we've moved forward. My dad moved from a village to city. My parents moved from village to city. I moved from a city to international place. Our son is going to the next level. So stay humble in all this. I think that's my greatest achievement. Being humble after all these years and all the success that I've achieved, and being able to do something back for society, which I think you have your own management in Prabhu sir and Chiti ma'am, Sucharita ma'am, who've done their bit in life, achieved, and then now they're paying back society by running a wonderful educational institution. Do the same in your lives too.
Thank you, sir, and Avikshit, for patiently answering our questions. And I'm sure that the audience will agree when I say that this session is an experience that will go a long way to teach us how to learn and gain knowledge. Over to you, Sangama.
The guidance and the support of our chairperson, Prabhu Rajagardar sir, has always helped us to understand that education is what remains when everything else is lost. Now, I request Prabhu sir to share his views on this occasion.
Good afternoon to all of you. Good afternoon, Janardhan, Avikshit, and all the delegates of the MUN conference. I thoroughly enjoyed the MUN conference. It reminded me of my days in Jawaharlal Nehru University when we used to have such kind of discussions. Of course, last 20-25 years, I've been away from international relations. I don't get to hear and participate and listen to much of this because I'm focusing my energies elsewhere. But it is just refreshed my memories of my college days, university days. And especially having Janardhan, I was feeling as if I was sitting in one of the hangout places in JNU and having this discussion. And thank you, Jana, for coming here and being part of this MUN, and also Avikshit bringing in the young person's voice. I also always enjoyed Jana's insights into discussion. The best part of this entire MUN was how Janardhan was able to connect a very complex, interesting topic to our own daily lives. I think that's the message, key message from Janardhan, what I've enjoyed, and I'm sure you're able to connect at the level of a student, level of a child. I also would like to thank all the delegates. I know I have one delegate in my own house sitting next door. She's been working really hard for the last 2 months, and I've been observing what she does. She felt that her mother being from School of International Relationships and then me also from JNU would really help, because we would do our homework and she could get away easily. But believe me, we never did our homework. We made her slog, we made her do her own research. And only day before yesterday when I spoke to her and asked her, what has been your experience doing this MUN? 3 or 4 things which she shared. I'm sure it's a similar experience all of you went through. Firstly, she said that it was great fun. I don't know what way it was fun, maybe interacting with you all, teamwork, discussion, post-meeting, having fun within the meeting, critiquing each other, pulling each other's leg, interacting with, that is the fun part. The second part, she said that I learned actually when I began this MUN, when Sangeeta ma'am told me that we should do research, I was sitting and wondering what this research is all about. It must be a very boring thing. Because the moment the word research was uttered, I thought it must be something very drag. But she actually said research was fun. Research allowed me to go and find out information, relevant, scoop out the relevant information, synthesize it, analyze it, and present it in such a way, and also ensure that you connect with what your next delegate is saying. So all this helped me to go and systematically approach knowledge, systematically approach about what I want from the vast knowledge and information resources which is available. The ability to think clearly, prioritize your work, and work as part of the team. That's something she learned, which she never experienced all her life in her schooling life. So I'm sure you all must have gone through that experience. A third thing which she said is that now I can speak on any online forums very confidently, because the amount of grill Sangeeta ma'am has put us through this meeting last 2 months, that we have lost all our innovations. Until now, I used to never switch on my video. I used to be very shy. I used to be very hesitant to talk, ask questions. Now, you put me on any online forum, I'm very comfortable. So are my friends. This has allowed us to remove all kinds of fear and inhibitions of being online, being on camera, public speaking and stuff like that. That's the third thing which I observed. Fourth thing what I observed was that it was completely student driven. Although the contours and the boundaries were given by Sangeeta ma'am, students themselves came together, they coordinated, they worked. This is a very difficult time. Remember, you're not meeting each other. It's a lockdown out here. Everybody's sitting in different places. They have to call each other. They have to do online meetings. It's very hard. It's not as easy as what it sounds to bring all this together because of the distance, because of the places you are in. In some places, some people have technology issues. Some people have coordination issues with time. So many things, all the constraints. I was very happy that you as students came together, rose up to the occasion, coordinated with each other, brought the best in you. Okay. Now, finally, with the delegates, I won't blame you. There are many areas one can improve in this MUN. Certainly, I will discuss offline because we're taken so much of your people time. But certainly, every year, what I'm seeing, the MUN is getting better and better. I wish that these MUNs can be more offline, more in a physical space where we can actually feel the energy of the people. And it will be nothing like having Janardhan in full blood and bones here in front of us, because seeing him live is a different experience, not only with his knowledge, but the energy he brings to the table. His presence is very electrifying. I wish he would have been in the room rather than sitting in his bedroom, right? So anyway, he made his time, and Avikshit also was very sharp and very crisp and very to the point. Thank you, Avikshit, for your time. Your dad has prepared you very well.
No problem.
Not only your dad, mom also, which is somewhere around. Okay, and all the best, Avikshit, for your graduation. You're going all the way out there.
Thank you so much.
It's going to be a little challenging without your support, your mom and dad.
Yeah,
but then as your dad kept saying, the going gets tough, the tough gets going. Don't worry. You'll do well.
Thank you.
Thank you all once again, and wish you all a happy weekend. And last but not the least, I would like to thank Sangeeta ma'am for her yeoman efforts. Without her anchoring this, I know how she has struggled, how much of effort she has put in. She has given nightmares to some people who are slack. I didn't even know that. And she worked like a military general, no? Like, she was on the dot. Everything to the core, never compromise on any work. Every little aspect of how the MUN should work. She helped the people sitting far away from her house. Thank you, Sangeeta ma'am and your team. Also technical team, Paranita ma'am, and all the others who've been part of this journey. Thank you for the third successful MUN. I hope next year we all can physically meet and have more lively MUN with much more interesting topics. Thank you once again all, and wish you all the best and good luck to you. Thank you, Janardhan. Thank you, Avi. Bye. See ya.
Thank you, sir. Your words will always instill confidence to march ahead. Now, my friend Sudiksha is here to propose vote of thanks.
It's an honor to have been asked to offer a vote of thanks on the occasion of Puberty Schools Model United Nations 2021. On behalf of my school and the entire management group here, I express my hearty gratitude to Janardhan sir for spending his valuable time and inspiring words. Thank you, sir. I thank our teachers for their supervision and guidance at every point of time. A big thank you to all the parents for their encouragement. Thank you one and all. So it's bye for now. Take care and stay safe.
Thank you, children. Fantastic job.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
ma'am.
Take care.
Thank
Have
you,
a good
ma'am.